What if the people we call Cajun were never the pure French refugees we've been taught they were? What if the bayou, the fiddle, the gumbo, and that unbreakable spirit were all born from a far more complicated, painful, and beautiful truth that DNA has only now dragged into the light? If that question just sent a shiver down your spine, do me a favor right now. Hit the like button so this story reaches more people. Subscribe to come with me on these deep historical journeys, and share this video with one person who thinks they already know their roots. It helps more than you know. Let's go back before the word Cajun even existed. In the early 1600s, a group of French settlers landed in what is now Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. They called the place Acadia. These weren't wealthy nobles. They were farmers, fishermen, and craftsmen who learned to survive brutal winters and short growing seasons. Over generations, they created a tight-knit society built on family, faith, and hard work. They intermarried with the Mi'kmaq people who had lived there for thousands of years. That detail rarely made it into our school books, but it matters. French men took Mi'kmaq wives. Mi'kmaq women entered Acadian communities. Their children grew up speaking both languages and understanding both worlds. Even then, the blood was already mixing. Then came 1755. The British, fearing Acadian loyalty to France, gave them an impossible choice: swear an oath to the British. Crown or leave. Most refused. What followed is known as Le Grand Dérangement, the Great Upheaval. Soldiers burned farms, separated families, and loaded people onto ships like cargo. Thousands died from disease, starvation, and drowning. Families were deliberately split apart so they could never regroup. It was ethnic cleansing with a British accent. Some Acadians ended up in France, some in England, some in the Caribbean, but a stubborn core made their way to Spanish-controlled Louisiana. The Spanish welcomed them because they needed Catholic settlers to hold the territory against the British. The Acadians arrived broken, penniless, and traumatized. The land they found was nothing like the neat farms of Acadia. It was swamp, heat, alligators, mosquitoes, and flooding. This is where the real story begins. They had to learn how to live in a completely alien environment, and they didn't learn it alone. The people already there taught them. Atacapa, Chitimacha, and Choctaw communities showed them which plants could heal, which were poison, how to navigate the bayous, and how to catch crawfish and make filet powder from sassafras. Spanish soldiers and Canary Islanders shared techniques. Free people of color and escaped enslaved Africans brought knowledge of rice cultivation, okra, and seasoning that would later define Cajun cooking. They didn't just live next to each other. They married. They had children. They created new families out of shared trauma and necessity. For a long time, historians treated this mixing as footnotes. The dominant story became a romantic one: pure French exiles who kept their culture perfectly preserved in the Louisiana swamps. Hollywood loved it. Evangeline became a myth that painted the Acadians as tragic, noble, and almost saintly in their whiteness and Frenchness. But that story was always too clean. By the early 20th century, the word Cajun had replaced Acadian in everyday speech. It was sometimes used as a slur. Teachers punished children for speaking French. The language almost died. The culture was pushed into the shadows. Then came the 1940s and 50s, when oil companies moved in. Outsiders discovered the food and music, and suddenly Cajun became marketable. The revival brought pride, but it also froze the image: white guys with accordions, shrimp boats, and pure French blood. That image is what's collapsing right now. When commercial DNA testing became widely available in the late 2000s and 2010s, thousands of people with deep Cajun roots uploaded their results. What emerged was not what anyone expected. The data showed something far more layered, far more American, and far more human. On average, people who identified as Cajun showed roughly 65 to 75%. Who identified as Cajun showed roughly 65, some 75% European ancestry. But the European part itself was not purely French. It included significant Spanish, German, British, Irish, and even Italian segments. That makes sense historically. The German coast settlers, the Spanish colonial period, Irish laborers who came later, all obeyed not purely French. It included significant Spanish, German, British, Irish, and even Italian segments. That makes sense historically. The German coast settlers, the Spanish colonial period, Irish laborers who came later, all of them folded into the community. But the real shock was the non-European DNA. Many families showed consistent Native American ancestry, ranging from 8% all the way up to 25-30% in certain family lines. Some of that traces back to the Mi'kmaq in Canada. Even more comes from Louisiana tribes. The DNA doesn't lie. It shows sustained intermarriage across generations, not one-off events. Sub-Saharan African ancestry also appears regularly, typically between 2% and 12%. In some parishes, the numbers run higher. This isn't surprising when you remember that Cajuns and Creoles lived side by side for centuries. Boundaries were more porous than the official records suggest. One genetic study focusing on southwest Louisiana found that self-identified Cajuns form their own distinct genetic cluster, but that cluster sits at the crossroads of French-Canadian, Spanish, Native American, and West African populations. They are, genetically speaking, a new people born in the American South. This discovery created tension in some families. I've read comments and spoken with people who took the tests, expecting to see 100% French, and instead saw Indigenous American and African segments. Some felt confusion. Others felt a strange sense of coming home. One woman told me her grandfather used to say their family had Indian blood, but everyone dismissed him as telling tall tales. Proved him right. She cried when she saw the results. The science also solved some historical mysteries. For example, we've long known that certain Acadian families seem to have better relationships with specific native tribes. The DNA now shows why. They weren't just allies, they were blood relatives. Think about what that means for a moment. The same people the British tried to erase didn't just survive. They wove themselves into the fabric of the land and the people who had always belonged to it. Their descendants carry the genetic memory of both the displaced and the original inhabitants. That is an incredible act of defiance and resilience. The food tells the same story if you know how to read it. The holy trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper is French. The filet is Choctaw. The okra and smoked meats carry West African influence. The spices reflect Spanish and Caribbean trade routes. Gumbo is not a French dish. It is a Louisiana document written in a bowl. The music does the same thing. The accordion came from German and Italian immigrants. The fiddle carries British and Irish roots. The triangle and washboard add that driving rhythm that feels purely Cajun. Yet the call and response singing style has African DNA in it. When you hear a great Cajun band at a dance hall, you're hearing the genetic story played out in real time. This is why the old narrative feels so incomplete now. We wanted a simple story of French purity surviving against all odds. What actually happened is more powerful. A broken people arrived with almost nothing, refused to die, and instead created an entirely new ethnicity by loving, struggling, and surviving alongside others who had also been pushed to the margins. That blending wasn't always peaceful. There was prejudice, class differences, and pain on every side. But somehow, in the isolation of the Atchafalaya Basin and the prairies of southwest Louisiana, something new and tough and joyful was born. Modern Cajuns carry all of this in their bodies whether they know it or not. The DNA tests are simply shining a flashlight on a truth that was always visible if you looked closely enough at the history, the language, the recipes, and the faces. Some older relatives still resist this. I've heard stories of family reunions where someone proudly announces their native percentage, only to be told, "We don't talk about that." That resistance is understandable. For decades, being Cajun was already a marginalized identity. Admitting even more complexity felt threatening to some. But the younger generation seems hungry for the full story. They want to know who they really are. And the truth is beautiful. You are the descendants of people who crossed an ocean, survived expulsion, navigated swamps, learned new languages, adopted new gods alongside old ones, and still managed to create the most life-affirming culture in America. Laissez le bon temps rouler isn't just a party phrase. It's a philosophy born from people who knew how quickly everything can be taken away. So you dance, you eat, you love hard, you laugh loud. Because tomorrow is never promised. The DNA has revealed something else that is quietly profound. Despite all the mixing, Cajun communities still show distinctive genetic signatures. After centuries of blending, a unique pattern has emerged that researchers can now identify. In other words, becoming mixed didn't erase them, it created them. They are a true Creole people in the deepest sense of the word. This challenges how we think about ethnicity in America. We love neat boxes. French, native, black, white. Cajun DNA laughs at those boxes. It says identity can be forged in the crucible of survival. It says culture is stronger than any single bloodline. It says you can lose everything, arrive with nothing, and still build something so distinctive that the world recognizes it instantly. That is the part that moves me most. When I look at old photographs of Cajun families from the 1920s, I no longer see French people in America. I see the faces of survivors whose ancestors refused to disappear. I see Mi'kmaq cheekbones next to French noses. I see West African rhythm meeting Celtic melancholy in a single accordion note. I see Spanish resilience and German work ethic and Choctaw knowledge of the land all dancing together on Saturday night. The Cajuns were never what we thought. They were better. They were the unexpected answer to one of history's cruelest attempts at erasure. Instead of vanishing, they became something entirely new, something so magnetic that people from all over the world now travel to Louisiana just to taste what they created. So the next time you hear an accordion cutting through the night air, or you smell rue darkening on the stove, or you watch someone two-step like the floor owes them money, remember this: that moment exists because thousands of broken people chose life. They chose each other. They chose this land. And their bodies still carry every single one of those choices. That's not a romantic myth. That's DNA. That's truth. And it is one of the most American stories ever told. If this video shook up everything you thought you knew, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment with the most surprising part for you. And if you want more stories that rewrite what we think we know about American roots, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. We are just getting started. The Bayou has kept its secrets long enough. Now the truth is finally singing.